This is very important, ladies and gentlemen. What are the Republicans going to do about Obamacare? Are they going to say, unless we control all levers of the federal government and have a supermajority in the Senate, we can't get rid of this law? What are they going to do? Now, there are ways to address 85 to 90% of this law on the funding side via the budget reconciliation process. And we're not going to drag ourselves into the weeds today, but that said, it requires a simple majority. But will they have a simple majority of Republicans in the Senate who will support it? I am of the belief that 25 to 40% of the Republicans in Congress, particularly in the Senate, support major aspects of Obamacare. They are what I call, and what I said in Liberty and Tyranny, what is it now, almost 5 years ago, neo-statists. They're not of the Marxist variety. They're not statists like Obama and his ilk. But they are neo-statists. They don't mind big government. They fundraise off of corporatists and crony capitalists who require government subsidies and regulations to make their fortunes. So they have a close association with big government, which is why when they get into office, they grow the government. They reject constitutional conservatism because their mentality is not your mentality. They're not conservatives. So how are we going to do this? So this is why it's important. You have the Senate Republican leader up for election. He needs to answer the question. He's already surrendered the power of the purse to Obama, and he actually has proposed, he claims on a temporary basis, which is outrageous on any basis, he's actually proposed to give Obama the power over the debt ceiling. Through this cockamamie idea, where Congress would have to vote to deny raising the debt ceiling. And if Congress voted and refused to raise the debt ceiling, the president could veto that. And then Congress would need a supermajority to override the veto, which Congress cannot get. In other words, they're handing the spending and borrowing and taxing power, in essence, to the President of the United States. This is the idea that came out of Mitch McConnell's mouth, who's busy running against the Tea Party and attacking conservatives, and how dare anybody challenge him in a Republican primary. Challenge him, he needs to be defeated, in my humble opinion. And there's our friend Paul Ryan, nicest guy you'll ever meet, by the way, and he really is. Smart as a whip. Got all kinds of good ideas, but he's got some bad ones, too. And one of the bad ones is his announcement today, or yesterday, with the Wall Street Journal, Paul Gigot, pushing, prodding. We're not going to have another thing. Don't we have this audio, Mr. Producer? I know we do here. Listen to cut one. This is Paul Ryan being questioned by Paul Gigot, the editorial page editor at the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal is looking out for Wall Street, period. And I have no problem with Wall Street. I'm just tired of subsidizing them. That's all. Let them sink or swim on their own like everybody else. I'm not into welfare for billionaires. Call me crazy. But here's the exchange. Go.
Can you tell us right now here that there will not be another shutdown or another debt limit?
Yeah, I'm comfortable saying that. How we avoid the shutdown?
Let's stop right there. Listen to the question. This is the editorial page editor, the chief guy at the Wall Street Journal. Can you tell us there will not be another government shutdown or debt ceiling brinksmanship? These guys claim to be conservative. They claim to be libertarians. They claim to be fiscally rational people. They're none of these things. They're big government, I don't know, corporatists. I don't understand, ladies and gentlemen. Since when did the government spending and borrowing and taxing become so sacrosanct that you can't have a government shutdown, quote unquote? And that phrase isn't even accurate. We've talked about it enough. We've had 20 government shutdowns since the 1970s. And now the Wall Street Journal editorial page chief is saying, can you promise us this will not happen? So in other words, will you surrender to Obama? Because I would ask Paul Gigot, what would you do to stop this? And he has no answer. None. Zero. But listen to the nature of the question. Listen to the nature of the question. So now conservatives, we have to defend the unfettered, the uninterrupted running of the federal Leviathan. That's now what conservatism has become. That's what Mitch McConnell says, Paul Ryan says, the Wall Street Journal editorial page says. We have an obligation to make sure that the federal Leviathan never stops. Not for a day, not for an hour. They call it a government shutdown. So now that's our responsibility. That's our obligation. And Paul Ryan, the chairman of the House Budget Committee, has just signed on to it. And I assure you, Patty Murray, the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, and Harry Reid and Obama, they are thrilled. Because that means these guys are going to buckle. We just got to get through the next election and elect more Republicans. Not conservatives, not constitutionalists, not the crazy nut jobs. No. We don't want to actually cut government. We can't have a shutdown. We don't want to slow down. We don't want anything down. They're exposing themselves. They're confessing right to us who they are. They're neo-statists. All right, let's hear it. Go ahead, Mr. Producer.
Can you tell us right now here that there will not be another shutdown or another debt limit?
I'm comfortable saying that. How we avoid the shutdown, whether or not Patty and I come to an agreement with a budget agreement, or we just have what we call a continuing resolution that just keeps going, either one of those two scenarios will prevail, and therefore we will not have a government shutdown.
Yay! And you know what that means, ladies and gentlemen? The debt clock keeps ticking. Paul Ryan just said, Paul Ryan, who's held up as Mr. Budget Cutter, he's held up by the Bush guys. This is the guy. This is the future. He just said, basically, whatever it takes. Just another continuing resolution. Well, just another continuing resolution, ladies and gentlemen, will add hugely to the debt. So he's not going to do anything. I don't care how many white papers he puts out on Medicare, on the budget. He's not going to do anything. He was on my program last year. What did he say, Mr. Producer? We have 2 years, maybe, to start addressing the debt. 2 years, and that's it. Did he not say it? We ought to dig that up for tomorrow. Think we can find that? 2 years. That's it. That was a year ago. Now it's, if Patty and I can agree, we'll just have a continuing resolution. Well, what happened last year? I don't understand. Well, I do understand. The Hill, Eric Wasson. I think I'm the only guy, and I don't know, I don't listen to all these guys and gals, who actually gives credit where credit's due. Point out who writes things and who provides the audio. Anyway, in the Hill newspaper, the House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan said, the country doesn't need to worry about another government shutdown in January when the current stopgap bill runs out. And you heard it yourself. But even more than that, guess what else happened today? They're saying on the Hill that, this deadline on the budget? Yeah. Deadline on the debt ceiling? Yeah. Supposed to be February 7th? Yeah. Well, it really isn't February 7th. You ready for this one? Politico. Members of Congress receive word Wednesday. That's today. They'll have some breathing room next year on raising the debt limit. And though Congress agreed in October to hike the nation's borrowing authority through February 7, the Treasury Department's use of extraordinary measures will likely give lawmakers an additional month according to the Congressional Budget Office. In fact, the CBO said tax refunds and revenue in the spring could push the deadline even further to May or early June. So push till what, ladies and gentlemen? Till we get closer and closer to the election. Now, why would the Democrats want to do that? Because it'll make it harder for the Republicans to cut anything. And I suspect the Republican majority, the Republican leaders, you've heard them, McConnell, Ryan, and others, will be all in favor of that. Because there's nothing they're prepared to do in any effective way to address this debt. And there's nothing they're prepared to do in an effective way to lay out a plan on Obamacare. This is what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be a downer here. I'm saying, everybody, look at Obama's polls. He's sinking, and we want him to sink. We want him to be as ineffective in his agenda as possible. Although he's been ineffective in other ways already. Okay. Got that. But there's a void. From that to what? There's a void. And here's the other thing. The next time somebody brings up Christie to you, the next time you see one of the people on Fox, which is obviously cheerleading for Christie, promoting him, ask yourself this question. There's a lot of questions, but ask yourself this question. Christie has never lifted a finger to fight Obamacare. If you listen to this program, you've known it for years. Christie refused to sign a brief that was signed by 27 governors and attorneys general throughout this country, every region of this country, to try and stop Obamacare before it exploded onto the scene as it has since October. He refused to sign it. Do you know why? I'll get to that in a minute. The Supreme Court upholds it, but the Supreme Court says something very interesting. That the President and Congress cannot force the states to participate in this program. It was the one gleaming area that we could embrace and say, okay, the states do not have to set up these centrally organized and defined state exchanges. So the people in the states can look for other options and not be forced into this state exchange, which is really a government fiat, a federal government fiat. The vast majority of Republican governors said, good, we're not going to set it up and we're not going to impose that on our citizens. Except for 8 of them. And one of them was Christie. Christie set up a state exchange. Christie has been implementing Obamacare. Christie didn't lift a finger to fight it in the courts before it became law. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if Republicans nominate Christie, Obamacare is here forever. Even if he wins. Especially if he wins. Do you want another campaign like the Romney campaign because of Romneycare, where the candidate can't even raise the issue of Obamacare? I guess he could raise it and say, oh, look at these incompetents. They didn't set it up right. And, we should have been working together to set it up. And we could have done this together and that. You get my point? How can any Republican be said to be a conservative? Any Republican, governor, senator, congressman, what have you, if that governor has embraced Obamacare? He can't. And he's not.